Welcome to the SaaS Revolution Show. I'm your host, Alex Theuma, CEO, founder of SaaStock. Delighted to be joined today, and I think again, because you've been on the podcast before, with Anthony Kennada, who is the CEO and founder of AudiencePlus. Welcome, Anthony.
Thanks, Alex. So happy to be back.
Yeah, great to be on. Like a couple of years, it must have been. Like I can't. Maybe when you were with Front that you were last on?
It was either Front or tail end of Gainsight, but yeah. It's been years, and certainly in a kind of different context as a marketing leader. So this will be fun.
Yeah, and for those SaaS aficionados, I know there's many listening. You probably know Anthony, as one of the best CMOs in SaaS, CMO of Gainsight. You went to Front, CMO of the rocket ship Hopin, but now Anthony is in the CEO and founder seat, which is interesting. So we're going to talk a lot about this and his journey. But Anthony, I'll call you AK. I think a lot of people call you AK. It's easier. Tell us, now you're back. I guess who is 2023 Anthony Kennada?
Oh man, that's a terrifying thought exercise. I'll start by saying I'm a husband and father, and I think that's sort of my, more of where I'd put my sort of identity. But now, through the work context, I'm a student again. It's so much fun. So I went from, to your point, kind of running marketing teams for about 12, 13 years now, and becoming kind of a student of enterprise marketing and marketing and enterprise software, studying a lot of the consumer marketing tactics, frankly, and figuring out ways to really stand out, build a brand that resonates, that breaks through the noise, and then kind of monetizing the thought leadership that we've developed into a pipeline and different kind of revenue outcomes. That's sort of been the playbook at Gainsight, and the others. And so, I know we're going to talk about this, but jumping into the founder seat, this is stuff I don't know. Going from 0 to 1 and this is stuff, obviously, you guys have built such a great community on both sides of this, but also for SaaS founders. It's a student of learning everything from, building a product from 0 to 1. How do you sort of come up with a design kind of vision and get these ideas out of your head and onto Figma, to maybe some boring things like bookkeeping and tax law and all of this sort of stuff. So I've just been so energized by the process, by learning, by the team that we've developed, or the product that we're building, the problem that we're going to go and solve. So just super excited about 2023 and everything to come.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, for me, 8 years into the journey, first time entrepreneur though, and what an opportunity just to learn continuously, daily, and through the highs and lows, right? But yeah. I think I've never learned so much, and the things that I enjoy doing and not as well. But from that, a question actually, because I've always known that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but it took me until I was in my 30s to really kind of find the thing and then act on the thing and have the drive to act on the thing.
Yeah.
And I had a 11-year sales career. So my question is that you've had this marketing career and being a CMO at 3 top SaaS companies. Did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur and you were just waiting for that opportunity? Or tell us about that.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
In fact, I didn't want to be an entrepreneur. I think for me, I put, I think a lot of folks know Nick Mehta, the CEO of Gainsight. I put him, the sort of when I think about what an amazing CEO is, I think of Nick. And I knew, just quite frankly, I can't be Nick. I don't have it within me he's a superhuman in terms of, obviously all the business side, but just the way he scales his relationships and everything. It's quite incredible. And so that's always been what's slowed me down, right? It's I wish, but maybe I'm just not meant to kind of do that. And I think over the years, kind of distancing myself a little bit, from, or not distancing myself, but as I sort of moved on from Gainsight, working for other founders, meeting other CEOs, I think I was look, well, okay, Nick's here and superhuman, but there's a lot of folks that aren't Nick that are finding success and they're building good businesses and all of that. And look, if I sort of challenged myself in this new era, which I was feeling sort of restless as a CMO, if I challenge myself in this kind of new position and sort of aspire to be, a Nick Mehta or kind of in the Nick Mehta school of leadership, I think I can potentially do well. But that, all that to said, that was sort of, I think, the environmental kind of back of my head kind of thought process. And I think we'll dive deeper into this. But it was when the problem became so annoying and there wasn't a solution, where I was like, gosh, like, how has no one solved this thing before? And having kind of built in-house solutions over time, now I had the marriage of like an idea, an opportunity, and that sort of vocational kind of career calling to step into that new role. So that's where it was sort of like hit me on the side of the head kind of a thing. Like, I have to do this, kind of take that step. And as you know, 8 years ago, a courageous step forward and putting yourself out there, but kind of felt like just had to do it.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, like, you got 2 young kids, right? And I mean, I had one on the way, and it was like,
Congrats.
the message was, no, I had one on the way. No
We
more.
had one on
no
the way
more.
at that point. Yeah.
No more. But the message was like, I'm going to give up my executive career, and I'm going to try and start a business, and we're going to stop the only income in the household. But this is going to work. And then, having to sell that to, your partner who is expecting, was kind of pretty tough. So, I mean, like, personally for you, was there a kind of similar situation? You got 2 kids and it's like, hey, like, I'm a well-paid CMO. I'm assuming you were well-paid, and then it's like, I'm going to do this thing, and, maybe we're not going to get the same kind of income right now.
Yeah.
How did that go down in the household?
Yeah. I mean, well, thankfully there was support. Now, my wife's been amazing and a big champion of this. And so there wasn't sort of headwind, but she's like, yeah, I mean, I had to sort of tell her, like, we're going to get paid close to nothing, and we're going to, kind of risk it and live a little bit off of savings and try to figure out how to get there. And so, it was hard. And for sure, I think that the important thing is the mentality going into a season like this, where for me, again, like, I have so much conviction behind what we're doing, and so much fulfillment behind going to work every day. And I think that is something for entrepreneurs that, I'm not suggesting there's a reason that's the reason we do this, but there is this sort of greater purpose to, I think, my role now than it was as an operator. And so that fuels me for sure, but I have to sort of keep, even now, even in the crazy, boundaries in place, and remind myself, as I did at the opening of this podcast, that was more for me than for the listeners, that I'm a husband, father first, that I have to maintain that balance. I have to ensure that we can build a great business that's solving real problems in the market, and also be present with my kids. And so it was more about that conversation than it was the financial. And thankfully, again, she's been a great partner to help us build the right rhythms in place. And what's pretty cool as the founder is even operationalizing some rhythms in the culture of our very young company. I borrowed this one from Gainsight, but we have 1 day a week where we don't do anything. No email, no Slack, no communication. Folks are welcome to work and catch up if that's what they want to do. But the idea is to be totally present with whatever it is that we want to do, be with our children, be with our partner, be with our loved ones, go pursue a hobby, whatever, for at least 1 day a week. So that's where I think we've done a decent job of saying, okay, how do we build this company the right way and enable our teammates to also have that balance? That, so far at least, that's been more of the goodness than the financial kind of component. That's still very stressful, but I think we're just such big believers in what we're doing that I think it'll work itself out on that front.
I love that. I mean, just a couple of things quickly. I could almost see this turning into a 3-hour podcast, but we don't have the time for that. But on the husband and father first and being present, I mean, it's great that, you're thinking about that, not only reminding yourself that, but thinking and acting that, because many entrepreneurs, including myself, often get really fully consumed by the business, that it can be really hard to be present. And I've heard many stories and seen know many people that this has impacted their relationships and their marriages and ended up in divorce and regrets of like, oh, I didn't spend enough time with my kids because I was all in on the business. And it's really hard to find that balance. I'm definitely personally doing a better job now than I have been, but I'm not always present. And I know that, and it must be frustrating for for your partner. And on the 1 day, I love that 1 day a week where you can do anything. I mean, just to clarify, so effectively you're saying you're a 4-day a week business.
Oh no,
no.
Still a 5-day week business, but
Okay.
you know how it is. Like on Saturday, you get that email from your CEO or from your CFO or that
Yeah.
sales deal that needs to be pushed across the finish line. And
Yeah.
our mind just goes into work and our like, you know, uh, physiological kind of responses like trigger like
Gotcha.
stress and all of these types of things. And so
Yeah.
think of it almost like I haven't figured out quite how to do this yet, but like disconnecting email and Slack at the server level for 24 hours
Yeah.
on a Saturday, just to give
Yeah.
people
Yeah. Yeah.
some space.
Okay. Makes
Yeah.
sense. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, look, tell us a little bit about so you worked Gainsight, Front, Hopin. Let me actually ask a little bit about Hopin because
Yeah.
obviously I saw that it's big news for me, somebody that follows SaaS, that Anthony Kennada left Gainsight and he went to Front. And then 18 months, and I thought, okay, he's picked a rocket ship sort of winner
Yeah.
here, earned your shares at Gainsight, wanted something new. And then fastest growing SaaS company on the planet appears, hires you as the CMO, obviously because also from what I understand, your mission and your passion of events, I think really quite tied in to Hopin and probably an opportunity too good to refuse. But it wasn't that long of a tenure, and I think like for the listeners as well, if they know, Hopin was providing like virtual events platform, boomed during COVID, was the fastest growing SaaS company on the planet, and then since COVID ended, and I think everybody knew it was going to end, have had a series of cuts within the company, and perhaps have struggled to adapt to the non-COVID world as quickly as perhaps they should. But why did you join? Why did you leave? What was the experience
Yeah.
there?
Well, man, I mean, you covered a lot of it. Why did I join?
Yeah.
Things like SaaStock, like the Pulse kind of community that we had at Gainsight, like that really is part of my biggest passion and what I get to do as a marketer. And the idea of reinventing that industry or that format, especially in early, what was it, I guess, or in 2020 when, as you know well, the event industry was impacted so hard. And so there was a chance to sort of speak into that, to gather that community and to serve them through our sort of software, but also our own programming and content and everything. And it felt very authentic, but also, as you mentioned, an offer I couldn't refuse kind of a thing. And so I loved Front, loved everything, had frankly zero reason to leave, but was sort of pulled away by the romance of that idea of reinventing the event industry for the modern age. And you're right. I walked into the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. It was 100% of the leads came through the contact sales form. And we didn't have enough salespeople or SDRs on the other end to fulfill the leads, to pick up the phone. So this was like a story, that I think is, maybe some other companies have done that, but I haven't seen anything like that before in my career. And so really my charter was okay, so let's start building some of the other stuff while we're also kind of optimizing the inbound flow. And so we, it was a really great run. To your point, I think there was, a lot of, I'd say just giving Hopin some credit. Like we didn't have a lot of benchmarks for how to manage growth in a season where all of the benchmarks were being written, right? In the sense of there was a pandemic that was fueling a lot of folks to go online, and so then you start applying like SaaS metrics on top of that, and you're starting to create like all right, how do we go if we went from 0 to 65 million in ARR in 1 year, which is wild? What do we do next year? How do we go from 65 to what? And you're applying kind of benchmarks. It's really difficult to kind of forecast growth, and I think over time we collectively made some miscalculations there. So why did I leave? I think there was two kind of components. One, kind of seeing that we were kind of headed into this darker chapter, and frankly not kind of seeing kind of how we were going to, economics aside, like the product vision, like where we were really headed. Like I didn't see kind of that sort of how the story would evolve in a way that made sense. But as that was happening too, was really the birth of this new idea that I was kind of mentioning to you, and sort of the hunger to start something. And so I would say it was, partially the sort of walking away from Hopin, but it was a lot more of me running towards this opportunity. And yeah, so I think that's frankly what it was. And I wish them the best. I think, they've got still some really good people there. But I think that realizing that there's a big hole in the market for something that still, I think, speaks to my heart, not necessarily on the event side directly, but this idea of building thought leadership, activating an audience, building a community, and using all of that goodness and value exchange to actually impact the business. That's still, Hopin did that to some extent. And I think that this new company is going to be like right on the nose with it.
So what are the lessons from building AudiencePlus to date? The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah. I think the good I'll start with is this idea of building in public is one that I think we've seen a lot in the consumer world, the direct D2C world as well, e-commerce. And what I mean by that is basically being very transparent, not sort of being necessarily afraid of competition and sharing your story, being vulnerable. That has actually counterintuitively turned out to be really a great idea for us. And I think I hinted towards this earlier, but it was a chance for us to put ourselves in the shoes of our customer using our own product, gain a lot of empathy, be able to educate the market about our category or just kind of the problem that we want to solve, and gather an audience of people who care about this topic. So that wasn't something we went in saying, hey, we're going to do this. Part of our product was done, or at least, in a good enough shape to ship. And so we shipped kind of the front end of AudiencePlus while we're sort of building a lot of the back end capabilities. So I think the encouragement there is, to the extent it makes sense for your business, if there is sort of a public facing version of your SaaS product or whatever, not being afraid to kind of put yourself out there and start kind of capturing feedback along the way. That worked out quite well. The bad, oh man, I can't tell if this is bad or ugly, but coming into this, one of the things that I thought was the way you build an audience is to effectively deplatform your audience off of social, which still is to some extent, I think, a big part of the strategy. You've got what we refer to as rented channels. So your social media content networks like YouTube or Spotify, SEO, anywhere where you're actually relying on someone else in order to get distribution or get reach of your content. And I thought it was just as easy as, okay, we just like post a link to our blog and then people go to the blog and then they like it and then they sign up or whatever. Turns out not the case. Turns out these algorithms all of them are effectively working against us. They are limiting our organic reach and want to keep people on property. And so an example of this is if you ever go on LinkedIn, you see what's sort of becoming maybe a little annoying, like a post that has like one sentence and a line break, one sentence and a line break, no link, and then an hour later, a link in the comments. These are marketers or creators or whoever who are trying to basically hack the LinkedIn algorithm to get reach. And I found if I post a link in my post, I'll get like a fifth or less of the impressions that normally would get if I don't. And so I think the lesson there for us is it's not quite that easy. It's more of a battle with some of these rented channels in order to deplatform. And there's been a lot of great research. We've produced some content around how to do that, how to sort of build algorithmic capital with LinkedIn, let's say, and then slowly start peeling your audience away. So there are ways to do it, but I thought it was a lot more straightforward than it turns out it is. And what's been nice is that's actually even more validation for the business that we're building, saying, hey, like you gotta be where your audience is in these rented channels, but you can't build a business relying on these other people, other companies that don't have your interests in mind in order to monetize and sell your products. And ugly, I'll just say Anthony behind a spreadsheet doing bookkeeping that is a bad, very ugly situation. So finding a great partner, agency, consultant, or otherwise to take me at least out of the kind of accounting process.
Yeah. Good things there to touch on. I mean, just quickly, obviously, I love the fact that you're building an audience whilst you're building the product and, kind of in stealth and, before you launch it. I think it makes a lot of sense with what you're doing and your background to do that. I think you also mentioned if it makes sense for your business, you should look to do that. Certainly like SaaStock, I was building an audience, as you know, I think like with SaaScribe, before I actually knew what SaaStock was going to be. So we built the audience first, and then the audience told us that they wanted SaaStock, and then it was like, okay, and then we built what they wanted, after kind of 12 months, which was really good. And I think like Drift was quite similar.
Yep.
They built the brand, built the audience, before they actually, like 1 year later, launched, and certainly some similarities there. So I don't know if too few SaaS companies actually take the opportunity to do that, but whilst they're building, they could start to potentially build that audience. Maybe you got better insights there than I have. So I don't see it that often. I have to say.
I don't see it that often yet. I mean, I think that, the best, I think B2B marketers are really good at pattern matching. And what we find is that the consumer world is about 5 years ahead of the enterprise software world. And then the D2C world is maybe 18 months to 2 years ahead of us. And so, just matching that, okay, if this is how the changing expectation with consumers, with how they engage with content, how they engage with companies that they follow, we know the Gen Z generation cares deeply about companies that align with their values and their purpose and their sort of maybe the softer side of building a business. If you're able to capitalize on that by being vulnerable, being transparent, and talking about that stuff, it feels novel, but it's been proven, I guess, in other industries. And so just being able to say, how can we bring that into B2B? How do we bring that into the SaaS world? I guess I'm trying to say is we sound like maybe geniuses, but we're not. We just did what other companies have done and just brought it to SaaS. And like I told you offline, Alex, every company is now going to do what SaaStock did, in the sense like you guys were the pioneers for building that audience, and then kind of over time, kind of building added products and services. So we're all now learning from you and you guys and your industry for how this is going to take shape.
No, you're too kind, but obviously I also believe that the same kind of belief that every company will turn into a media business, and certainly leverage that a lot more. On the ugly, you behind the spreadsheets, I think a lesson I learned the hard way is like not bringing in a finance controller or a bookkeeper soon enough. I think I did the SaaStock accounts, not like we had an accountant, but I did the books for about 3 years, and it wasn't pretty. And on a Sunday I was doing the bookkeeping, and it was just stuff that I hated doing. So it wasn't my sweet spot. I wasn't the best at it. Things looked a bit better when I got the pros in, for sure. So don't hold on to it for too long, for sure. And I want to jump in now to this topic that we spoke about and pre-agreed on, which segues nicely into a lot of the stuff that we've spoken about, like why SaaS companies, SaaS CEOs, need to figure out owned media, and if they do, where I think we're assuming they do. So I guess kind of jumping into it, should media, like in 2023, and there's a lot of worry about the economy and so many priorities that a CEO has in SaaS, but should media be a priority in today's economy with the headwinds that we're facing? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think originally the aspirational message that we were really clinging on to is this kind of like what HubSpot and others have really started to evangelize, this idea that we're moving from this transactional way of acquiring customers, serving customers, to a more relational way of doing so. I think they refer to it as community-led growth, or something to that end on stage at Inbound this year. And I think that's something that every marketer would get behind. Like, yes, of course, we want to all do that. Of course, we believe that, leading with kind of brand and thought leadership, makes a lot of sense, and building relationship at scale, as I mentioned. But this year, we're just trying to survive. This year, we're just trying to do more with less. We're trying to hit our number with less resources. The number's not going down and the pressure's going up. So I get that. I buy into that long-term vision, but what is the short-term answer for me just to get to next quarter? And what we've discovered is that the good news in all of this is the same headwinds that are facing marketers in 2023 are the same sort of roadblocks for our ability to become more relational. And so we have this like really interesting kind of opportunity to address kind of the core parts of the marketing engine today that don't have this sort of high cost and high barrier of entry to participate in, and also set us up for more of this kind of relational future. I think we're going to dive into some of these things, but the attention kind of economy and being able to break through, and how do we use things like media to get our story told in the right formats and distributed to the right audiences. A changing relationship with paid media, and seeing a lot of stories in the market of companies moving away from paid and doubling down on owned media. The algorithms we mentioned, the bad of my experience, like we're all facing this. We don't get any sort of rich engagement data from these third-party networks. We get number of views or impressions or listens, and we know that we have to like fight the algorithm in order to get our story told. And the fourth bit is building the sort of first-party data set. So third-party cookies are going to be completely removed from Google Chrome, which represents the biggest kind of cohort of web traffic in 2024. And so building a first-party database is existential to our ability to even do B2B marketing in this next chapter. So I think there's all four of those headwinds are things that are getting in our way today from hitting the target, hitting the numbers that we need to. And also, I think they're the four things that really set us up well for achieving the vision that HubSpot and others have paved for us with a more relational, community-led future.
Let's pick on some of those points. And so like paid media, I think you mentioned it's becoming more expensive.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? What is the impact if you're a SaaS company?
Yeah. So I think all of us, if you're a SaaS marketer or leadership position, you've had that conversation with your CFO, FP&A, whoever, coming into 2023, where they looked at your marketing programs budget, and of course, in some cases, your headcount budget as well. And they bring out the red pen and they say, hey, here's your number, get to this number. And often on the program budget, the highest kind of bucket, the biggest bucket of spend falls under paid media. And this could be Google PPC or search marketing. It could be LinkedIn, it could be retargeting, even though that's going away now with third-party cookies, or at least in the same kind of way. And so it's the most scrutinized line item in the program spend because it's probably the biggest. Now, how do we deploy that spend? We typically defend our brand terms on Google, and we'll bid on some industry keywords. And what's happening is our competitors are bidding against our brand terms. Everyone is bidding against a very small subset of keywords. And so it's driving up the cost to participate in paid media in general. Beyond that, what I found is what we do is we fine tune the landing page on the other end of a paid media campaign, and we optimize for conversion. And so we get a lot of people actually filling out the form, but that cohort of pipeline is the lowest converting pipeline all the way to revenue. And so not only is this the biggest spend we have, it's actually the least impactful or the least effective spend relative to content marketing, organic kind of brand, some of the things that are more, quote, relational in scale. Now, there's a lot of great companies that have sort of like tested this. And the most famous one, literally yesterday came out in the news, was Airbnb, that actually moved their spend away from paid and put it all in owned media, or from search marketing specifically as part of paid, put it in owned media. And they beat earnings now every single quarter and are running much more efficiently and achieving the same results, if not better. So I think that's the sort of lesson for us is I think there's a place for paid, especially as you think about the LinkedIn's and the social kind of platforms, which effectively are advertising platforms, right? I mean, I think conceive of them in that way, think about them like that versus the sort of organic, major kind of organic opportunity. But that is sort of shifting our focus. It's helping us run more efficiently when we deprioritize paid in favor of spending a fraction of that budget on things like content creation and owned distribution.
And you also mentioned about third-party cookies going away. So when will this happen, and what's the impact there?
Already blocked on most major browsers. Google Chrome is the last one. Obviously, they have a lot at stake here to keep the money coming in. And 2020, it keeps getting pushed back. It was supposed to be this year, and so now it's 2024 that it's going to go away. Look, there's a lot of major impact. And by the way, for consumers, this is a great thing. The sort of annoying ads that follow you on LinkedIn after you say something on Alexa in your living room or whatever, like all of that sort of thing, the creepiness, I think is going to be much, much more controlled and subdued. However, for marketers, it presents a pretty big problem. Specifically, we think about retargeting, display ad network retargeting. What we've done is if somebody hits our blog or our website through long tail search, we'll cookie them. And then we'll sort of follow them in the display networks on Forbes or Entrepreneur or whatever they're spending their time online to win back that traffic. So somebody finds a blog post when they're searching, they eventually then see an ad unit for our company, they come back, they become a opt-in member of our database or whatever. That's going away as we know it, to be frank. And so that budget is now at stake to sort of reclaim and find another way to drive traffic. And so I would bucket that under the content distribution use case of third-party cookies. But in general, our ability to kind of close the feedback loop with paid media is going to be more complex when we're not passing cookies around. So it's something we're not talking about enough, but is actually going to cause, I think, some pretty significant damage to our ability to generate pipeline and kind of convert traffic the first time they hit our site.
You also mentioned at Inbound, HubSpot's conference, talked about community-led growth, and HubSpot, is it like 2 years ago or less, they bought The Hustle, like Sam Parr's The Hustle. And so we've seen like a few instances of SaaS companies buying what effectively media companies or communities, right? I think even Gainsight, I mean, they bought Insided, which kind of had a community with it as well. So what are your thoughts around this? And this is like us or SaaS companies stepping away from this more kind of transactional model and this community-led future. What do you say around that?
Acquiring is a good model if you can do it. What's great about acquiring it is not only are you buying the audience effectively, not only are you sort of leveraging the brand equity of that media brand into your SaaS brand, and so in doing so, HubSpot is even more relevant and cool by being sort of associated with The Hustle. So there's a lot of goodness there. But you're actually also acquiring a team that knows how to do this stuff. And we're learning a lot about how to do this stuff. But there's a reason these creators, and influencers and others or whoever are well paid. It's not just their followership, but their ability to engage that followership, to take a long form piece of content, be it a podcast episode like this, and snip it up into short form video clips for TikTok and all that. So you're buying the DNA of a media company too. So I think that's the benefit to the SaaS business. And then ultimately, I think I'm not an expert in M&A or whatever, corp dev, but I think that unit economics work pretty well for doing a deal like that. So that's, I think, the reason to buy a SaaS company. And to your point, we're seeing, late stage businesses, obviously public SaaS companies, potentially acquiring. And then what we're seeing is earlier stage companies or mid-market companies building this in-house kind of as an evolution of their content marketing team, typically, through the lens of revenue marketing or demand, versus the brand teams, at least in kind of the cohort of customers that we're really, spending a lot of time with. Reason being, the traditional media company might be fairly focused around awareness. And so that's really helpful for a HubSpot or Salesforce Plus or MailChimp Presents or some of these other companies. But fundamentally, this is a efficient driver of growth. And I think that's an important nuance for the listeners. If you are saying this all sounds good, but we're not HubSpot, we can't acquire The Hustle, and we're investing as deeply in brand as we'd like to be because we have to hit our targets. That's, I think, the opportunity for this strategy to be more widely adopted, is to view it less as sort of brand and awareness and more as like a fundamental go-to-market motion for us.
Makes sense. And just moving into the quick fire round here, Anthony. So what one thing has moved the needle the most for you in your career?
Relationships, hands down.
Did you learn that from Nick?
Yes.
What is the best advice you've ever received?
Take the meeting. I think for we get asked quite a bit for folks to get advice and all that sort of stuff. And I've done the best that I can. I'm not perfect to say yes to some of those meetings. People said yes to me when I was early in my career. And so it's kind of a build maybe from the last question, but go ahead and take the meeting as often as you can.
What is the biggest failure you've made and lesson learned?
I don't know if it's a big failure necessarily, but I think we could have done a lot more at front specifically to evangelize the category. And I think just the time got cut short and there, as I kind of moved on, but I would say that I felt like there was some unfinished business there at front.
What's the hardest thing about building a startup in 2023?
Managing cash, stress around future unknowns with things like fundraising, not knowing are we going to be in a world war? Are we going to, are good times back again? Like what's going to happen, and sort of managing against some extreme unknowns, I think is the hardest thing.
What does your daily routine look like?
Starting the day alone and quiet, whether that's meditation or prayer or just kind of really centering kind of myself, having coffee, seeing the kids, and then plugging in for a very intentional kind of work day and trying to hit the gym after work and make sure I'm home for dinner.
Oh, very good. And finally, as we wrap up, so obviously you're speaking at SaaStock USA, which is the 1st and 2nd of June, 2023. Yeah. It's in Austin. So we're going to make Austin our second home. Dublin is our first home, and I'm super excited about that. Apart from coming to see AudiencePlus for the first time and getting a demo live from the man himself, which I'm going to get done if I don't see it beforehand, why should people come to SaaStock USA? And, what are your thoughts around Austin as well?
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is the F1 move, right? Like we're planting in Austin, like, we're bringing this European and global phenomenon to the US, and what better place than Austin to really start that, local movement here. So you should come because it's an incredible city. And obviously surely if you're listening, you've heard of the incredible work that Alex and team have done at SaaStock, but we're in a season of an industry where we need community, we need to belong, and we need to lean on each other to figure out how are we going to, as we've talked about, grow this year, but then also set our teams up for success kind of as we accelerate out of this season. And so coming to things like SaaStock, this is where we get equipped, and this is where we build relationship, and where we leave Austin in a much better position to show up to work on Monday, but also to bring new ideas and kind of new relationships to the table. So I think you have to be there beyond AudiencePlus and all that. Like you have to be a part of this as we think about kind of how we're going to grow in this year.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Anthony. And where can people find you and AudiencePlus online to learn more about it?
Best place actually is audienceplus.com. And so if you go and subscribe there, we have our content, as I mentioned, and a weekly newsletter that we send out with insights. We have exclusive events and experiences. We have merch that's coming out. And so that's the best place to connect with us. And I do most of my kind of communication there, but of course I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, kind of all your social networks of choice as well.
Awesome. Great stuff. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you in person at SaaStock USA. Obviously looking and learning more about AudiencePlus, before then. And so thank you so much, Anthony Kennada, CEO and founder of AudiencePlus, for being a great guest on the SaaS Revolution show today.
Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it.